Happy Epiphany and welcome to another Ask the Consistory, a video podcast produced by the Confessional Orthodox Evangelical Lutheran Communion. I'm your host for this video, Reverend Jake Zabel of the St. John's Evangelical Lutheran Church, located in Dalby, Queensland, Australia. So our question for today is, where did the wise men or Magi come from? And so this is an interesting question because we're not 100% sure exactly where the Magi came from. And there are a couple different theories and traditions in the church. And so I'm going to talk about basically the three main ones that I know of. There may be more, but just for this video we're going to only address the main three. All we know from scripture, according to Matthew's Gospel, is that the wise men came from the east. According to one church tradition, there were three wise men, Melchior, Caspar, and Balthazar. These are generally called three kings as well. And it is taught in this tradition that Melchior came from Persia, Caspar from India, and Balthazar from Babylonia. And okay, there you go. That's where they're from. Done. Other traditions would say that these three men are not kings, but that they are instead, wizards or wise men. Wizard, wise-ard, like drunkard is for drunk, wizard is for wise man. So this tradition says that they were Magi, which is the word used in the Greek in Matthew's Gospel. And we don't really know much about the Magi. They seem to have been scholars and astrologers and people like that. It is believed that they came from the Babylonian Persian Empire. During the reign of Jesus, this was the Parthian Empire, which existed from 247 BC to 224 AD, and it was kind of the successor of the Seleucid Empire. It had kind of absorbed the Seleucid Empire, which was a remnant of Alexander the Great's empire, but that's going a bit off track into history of the Persian Empire. The point is, the Magi seem to be associated with Babylonia and Persia. See, the earliest known use of the word Magi comes from some inscription written by Darius the Great. This is known as the Behustan inscription, and so this is Darius the Great, the king of Persia. Also, the 1st century Greek historian Pliny the Elder names Zoroaster and the Chaldeans or Babylonians as the inventors of magic, and here he refers to the Babylonians and the Zoroastrians as Magi. So the easiest answer then would probably be that the Magi came from Persia as part of the Parthian Empire during the time of the birth of Jesus. This would make sense. Persia is in the east. We know from kind of the book of Daniel that there were these kind of scholars and astrologers in the Babylonian Persian Empire, and this is how people in Persia, through the Babylonian exile and through the events of like Daniel and Esther, the people of Persia learnt about the Jewish Messiah. So it makes sense that people over in Persia would know about the Messiah, and so when they see this star, they know that that's meant to be the Messiah's star, and so they would travel to Jerusalem looking for this one born king of the Jews. So that seems one of the most likely answers, that the Magi were just scholars and astrologers coming from Persia. However, there is one other theory, and this is based on a couple Old Testament texts referring to the kingdom of Sheba. See, Isaiah 66 speaks of multitudes of camels coming from Midian, Ephah, and Sheba, bringing gold and frankincense. And Psalm 22:10 speaks of kings of Sheba bringing gifts and worshipping the king. Now, since Psalm 72 is called a Psalm of King Solomon, some people would just say that the king in this psalm is King Solomon himself, and that this reference to the kings of Sheba bringing gifts to him is actually just a reference to like when the Queen of Sheba and other rulers brought Solomon all these gifts. But others have taught that Psalm 72 is actually referring to the Messiah, and that the kings of Sheba coming to bring gifts to this king is actually a reference to the wise men bringing gifts to the Messiah. In fact, there is actually one early church tradition that taught that the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon gold, frankincense, and myrrh as kind of a foreshadowing for when the kings of Sheba would bring Jesus Christ gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Now, this is just a church tradition. 1 Kings 10:10 just says that the Queen of Sheba gave King Solomon gold, precious stones, and spices. It doesn't mention myrrh, and it doesn't mention frankincense by name. See, the main reason why people think that Isaiah 60 and Psalm 72 is referring to the Messiah is mainly because Psalm 60 does mention gifts of gold and frankincense, although it doesn't mention myrrh. Now, another question people might be wondering is, isn't Sheba in the south? I mean, Jesus refers to the Queen of Sheba as the Queen of the South. Another question people might be saying is, isn't Sheba in Ethiopia? That's definitely not east of Jerusalem. That's actually south of Jerusalem and a little bit west. Well, this really depends on whether Sheba is actually in Ethiopia or not. Some scholars teach that Sheba is in Ethiopia, and a lot of this comes from a reference from Josephus, the Jewish historian from the 1st century, who connected the kingdom of Sheba with Ethiopia. And he did this based on Genesis 10:7, where Sheba is Cush's grandson, and we know that the kingdom of Cush is the kingdom of Ethiopia. However, one of Cush's sons is also Havilah, and Josephus associates Havilah with the land of India. So for Sheba to have to be in Ethiopia just because his grandfather was in Ethiopia doesn't connect. It's very possible that Sheba, or the founder of the kingdom of Sheba, didn't stay in Ethiopia and that he went and traveled. It's possible that even his father Cush, who established the kingdom of Cush, Ethiopia, may not have even been born in Ethiopia. He could have been born elsewhere and just moved to Ethiopia to establish his kingdom. So Josephus trying to use the genealogies in Genesis to say that Sheba in Ethiopia is a bit of a stretch. All that we do know is that Jesus calls the Queen of Sheba the Queen of the South. This is in Matthew 12:42 and Luke 11:31. However, many modern scholars associate Sheba not with Ethiopia, but with an ancient civilization known as Saba, which is located in the Arabian Peninsula in kind of modern-day Yemen. And see, this is interesting because if that is where Sheba is, it is both south and east of Jerusalem. I mean, just look at a map. You can see where modern-day Yemen is and where modern-day Israel is. Yemen is not only south of Jerusalem, but it is also east of Jerusalem. So if Sheba is located in modern-day Yemen, and the wise men came from Sheba, then they could both come from the kingdom of Sheba and also come from the east. And I've heard other scholars argue that things like frankincense and myrrh had to be made from certain types of trees, which were prevalent in the kingdom of Sheba and not in the kingdom of Persia. So there's a lot of people who can argue the case that the wise men came from Sheba rather than Persia. The only other issue that I would raise is that in Isaiah 60 verse 6, when it says that the camels or the multitude of camels are coming from Sheba, it doesn't just say Sheba, it also says Midian and Ephah, which Ephah was one of the tribes of Midian. So if you're going to try and use Isaiah 60 verse 6 to say that the wise men came from Sheba, then you got to take into account that Isaiah 60 verse 6 also mentions the lands of Midian and Ephah. So the wise men would also have to come from there as well. So where are the wise men from? We don't know exactly. There's a church tradition that says they came from Persia, India, and Babylon. There's another church tradition that says they came from Sheba, but it seems most likely that they possibly came from Persia. Just the fact that the wise men were Magi, and that Matthew never mentions them being kings, they were just, that's again, tradition says that they were 3 kings, and that comes from Psalm 72, where it says that the kings of Sheba brought gifts to the Messiah. But nowhere in Matthew's gospel does it ever say that the Magi were kings. They're just called Magi, which were scholars and astrologers. And so it's most likely that the Magi actually just came from Persia. So, to wrap up this video, the answer is we don't know exactly where the wise men came from. There's a couple different theories and church traditions which I've presented to you in this episode. Personally, I think they probably came from Persia, specifically from the Parthian Empire, which was the empire located in Persia at the time of the birth of Jesus. So I hope that answers your question. I've hoped you've enjoyed watching this video. If you'd like to have any of your questions answered by a future Ask the Consistory, you can email us at coelc-atc, that's coelc-atc @hotmail.com. Thank you for watching this episode. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Goodbye, God bless, and again, have a happy Epiphany.